This is an overview of the Call of Cthulhu 40th Anniversary Collector's Edition box set available from Chaosium. It is not an in-depth review of the product, but more of an overview of the contents. This is because I've not thoroughly read through everything here, and I'm no expert on the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, having only played about half a dozen times as both a player and a keeper. My main motivation for buying this was that I like the aesthetic of early and mid-80s RPGs and wargames, when everything was still developing and not yet totally corporatized, although not for long. Things were still rough around the edges. I generally support the reprinting of old products faithful to the original and in good quality. I'm not such a fan of the massive Original Adventures Reincarnated tomes, which look totally unwieldy and unnecessary, and the upcoming 50th anniversary D&D reprints of original D&D look so much like a collector's item that it would be unusable at the table, and most products that I buy I expect to actually use. This is priced at €112, which is about $120. It's fairly expensive, but I would say worth it. The quality is pretty good, and there is enough material here to run Cthulhu for years. A cheaper option is the basic collector's edition, which is €37, about $40. This set doesn't include the 5 supplements though. That makes it about €15 or $16 per additional booklet. Some of the booklets are worth this, some of them are not. Overall though, I think the price is reasonable. The box looks wonderful on the shelf and has nice cover art. The box itself is sturdy, and the booklets are pretty good quality with thick paper. Here's what's inside: a core rulebook, the source book for the 1920s, a world map with an Arkham map on the other side, a set of dice, a stack of handouts for all the scenarios, a keeper's screen, Shadows of Yog-Sothoth, an epic globe-spanning campaign, the first of its kind, the Asylum and Other Tales, which contains 7 scenarios set around the world and on the high seas, the Cthulhu Companion, consisting of 4 scenarios and additional rules and source material to expand the game, Trail of Tsathoggua, a mini-campaign comprising 3 scenarios that span across the world, and Fragments of Fear, containing information on additional gods, backgrounds, and other new rules as well as an additional scenario. The rulebook and the sourcebook to the 1920s would have both been included in the 1983 second edition version of Call of Cthulhu. The set appears to be a very accurate reprint of the originals. There are very occasional typos due to OCR reading, but these are very minor and do not inhibit comprehension. The design is clean and approachable, though the text is quite dense in comparison to modern standards. There is some black and white interior art and maps. With a little tweaking, I assume everything can be used in the latest 7th edition. The first version of Cthulhu that I purchased was 6th edition, which is more expansive than this 2nd edition, but the core mechanics are mostly the same. There are a few revisions in 6th edition, especially regarding skills used in social situations. There is also more background information, scenarios and rules for different time periods. As an aside, I'm not such a fan of the font and design in the 6th edition book. So let's start with the rulebook from this set. This is a 96-page softcover booklet, staple bound. It contains rules of how to build a character and how to play the game. The majority of game rules and character creation are contained in the first 26 pages. There are monster stats, a magic system, and additional rules on sanity, an important part of Call of Cthulhu. There are 3 scenarios included as well, plus an extra 40th anniversary extra special scenario added to this edition. Each scenario is fairly straightforward and narrow in scope, designed to be easily run by a new keeper, with some exceptions that I will come back to later. The cover art shows a nice picture of Cthulhu. It would be better in colour, but I imagine the original piece was monochrome to reduce printing costs when first released. Layout is clear and clean, and a comprehensive contents page at the back makes for fairly easy navigation. The arrangement of game rules is logical as well, starting with character creation before detailing the main rules that the system uses. Each section is clearly defined. A section about the Cthulhu mythos gives information which is most pertinent to playing the game. This is mostly monster stats. More in-depth mythos information is given in the supplements, but I think the keeper is expected to learn about the mythos directly from the work of H.P. Lovecraft. At the beginning of the rulebook is a list of stories most applicable to the game which the keeper is encouraged to read. Towards the end of the book is the How to Play the Game section, which is a fascinating read, especially coming from D&D. It is made clear that this RPG differs from action-focused RPGs. Call of Cthulhu differs in feel and motivation from other role-playing games. In many such games, an effective technique is to confront and attempt to destroy obstacles directly. Such a course of action will lead to disaster in a typical Call of Cthulhu scenario. The majority of the otherworld monstrosities are so terrible that any attempt to openly combat them will end gruesomely the player's characters. Even the merest glimpse of some of the more macabre horrors can send a character into screaming insanity. Charts for random encounters, wandering monsters and similar things are the bane of Call of Cthulhu. In this game, each event should be carefully crafted to give the players the maximum amount of thrills and chills. Call of Cthulhu is a much different game to D&D, and unfortunately the advice given is a little too broad to be of much help. There is general advice on how to run a campaign, but less in the way of specific steps to run a horror scenario. The keeper should have firm control over what is happening, though he should remain flexible and capable of adapting to the changing circumstances of his players, plans and abilities. I find this kind of advice too general to be of much use to a beginner. There is a brief example of play which at least gives an impression of the pace of play, which lacks the narrative style I would expect is required. Still, I'm sure that by now there are plenty of writings and videos on the best way to run Call of Cthulhu. There is a recommendation for literature to help craft spooky gameplay, including William Hope Hodgson and M.R. James, the latter of which I can highly recommend as well. This rulebook is for the second edition, as the first edition was revised very quickly after first printing, released only a year after first edition. The second edition was much more playable and balanced, it seems. All of the supplements included in this box were designed for the second edition. This information and more is included in a section at the back of the rulebook detailing the creation of the original game and the anniversary edition. A very interesting read. Next we have the sourcebook for the 1920s, 36 pages, soft cover and staple bound, as are all the books in this collection. Much of the information in this book would be included in the main rulebook in later editions. There is information on the cost of goods, distances and travel times, historical background and an expanded weapons list. Also included are additional monsters, archaeological dig site plans and more. Information on this time period is invaluable when running a game of Cthulhu. The way the world worked in the 1920s is so different from now, it is often difficult to imagine, especially for younger players. This sourcebook provides only a general overview to the period, but there are some specific things that will certainly come up in play. The early 20th century is quintessential to the game and the setting, so this is an important part of the box set. Next we have The Shadows of Yog-Sothoth from 1982, a 72-page globe-spanning Call of Cthulhu scenario to save the world, the first campaign ever released for Cthulhu. I really like the cover art, epic and sinister, in which the protagonists are insignificant in comparison to the alien architecture. It's a very recognisable cover with lovely colours. Reading through the campaign, it's a little tricky to determine how best to run it. The keeper information and scenario overview sections for each scenario are quite brief. It seems that a lot of improvisation is expected from the keeper. I've not run many Cthulhu games myself, so I'm not sure on the best manner of running this game, but certainly is very different from D&D, as I mentioned previously. A balance of railroading and improvisation looks to be required, and the task of running a scenario or even a whole campaign appears to be a daunting one for anybody new to the game. This campaign contains 7 scenarios designed to be played in order, and 2 bonus scenarios not connected to the main campaign which can be used at any time. The very first scenario involves the investigators joining an occult order, but the characters should have already made a name for themselves before the scenario can properly start, so I expect the campaign should begin after scenarios from the rulebook have been played. I'll not go in depth for the whole campaign, I'm still reading through it, and this is more of an overview of the box set. Still, it seems that additional preparation is required before the keeper can start running this campaign. Next, we have The Asylum and Other Tales from 1983, 72 pages, softcover scenario book. This is a collection of traditional scenarios and scenarios which might regularly occur during a campaign, such as an auction for occult items or a visit to an asylum. These scenarios are good for when the keeper has not got anything prepared or must quickly improvise situations which might commonly occur. These could also be used in conjunction with Shadows of Yog-Sothoth. There are 7 scenarios in total with useful maps. There's not much art in the book. Cthulhu Companion, Ghastly Adventures in Erudite Lore from 1983 is a 64-page softcover sourcebook. The book contains a collection of submissions to the Different Worlds magazine, a Chaosium periodical from the 80s. The contents are quite varied. They include essays on the Cthulhu mythos, 4 scenarios, rulebook editions, and some of Lovecraft's poetry. The rulebook editions and the mythos essays are quite specific, making them of limited use. At a glance, the standalone scenarios are varied. This book seems to have limited utility, but it's still interesting. Fragments of Fear, the second Cthulhu Companion from 1985, is 48 pages, softcover. This collection is similar to the first Cthulhu Companion, but I would say the information included appears to be more general and likely to be useful in a keeper's campaign. However, the booklet is much shorter. There are 2 new scenarios, one of which takes up a third of the page count. Like the first companion, the information here is not essential, but can help expand the campaign. Trail of Tsathoggua from 1984 is the very difficult to pronounce 64-page softcover scenario book. This contains 3 loosely connected adventures. The first 2 are set in Greenland and Canada and designed for physically fit investigators. These scenarios are for intrepid explorers rather than the typical academic or investigative characters. The third adventure is a classic haunted house. The cover art is, again, great, and I think each of the supplements included have a great 80s art style that I have a fondness for. There's a massive amount of black and white handouts to support all of the scenarios included, thankfully all labelled. A useful world map showing relevant sites that have names contemporary to the 1920s, printed on fairly good quality semi-gloss paper. On the other side is a map of Arkham, not really necessary at that size. The size comparison chart is kind of useful, but not so much. It has an odd scale of 1 inch to 11 feet. The keeper's screen is probably the most disappointing thing. It is quite thin and includes a lot of information which only will be rarely used, such as institutional disasters and a list of spells. To not include the resistance table on the screen is a major omission. So in conclusion, the box set contains everything that you will need to run Cthulhu in the 2nd edition system. Editions that follow are very similar and appear to have minor changes to make the game run better. I believe that it is only the latest 7th edition which has any substantial changes, but it's still relatively compatible to all other editions. The best parts of the box set are the source books and scenarios, which will provide years of play. The quality of the box set is pretty high. My version had some very minor issues with how the paper was cut, but overall it is a very nice box set to own. The paper thickness is good, the box is sturdy, and the text and formatting is very clear. I found a couple of minor errors in the rules which may have been due to OCR reading of the original book. These errors are unlikely to cause problems, and it seems that a good deal of effort has been spent on recreating these products from the original in the best way possible. I've not played the latest 7th edition version, which I hear is the most different from any other edition, but still very close to the basic rules. It is well supported and probably a better version to start with. Whichever version of the game that you play, the scenarios will be of great use. Having seen the kind of quality decline in products from major companies, it's nice to see a company reprinting their old products in a relatively good quality. Compared to Wizards with their thin paper and ugly art, the quality here is much better. Paizo used to reprint old edition material as well, as I recall, but in pocket size, which was so small that they were basically unreadable, though the paper quality was at least good with that company. The price of this collection may be quite high, but as I stated earlier, the campaign material will last for years, so you wouldn't have to buy anything else again. It seems that playing this game is very involved, both in the execution of scenarios and in preparation and knowledge of the mythos. When I have a chance to play through the scenarios, I'll be able to get a better understanding of how beginner-friendly this stuff is, but my first impression is that this is a more daunting task than running D&D. Overall, though, I am very pleased with this collection. The quality of the product is good, the reprints are well done, everything is clear and legible, and it seems that a great deal of care went into the product. It is a perfect box set to get an impression of the game in the mid-80s, and as far as I can tell, it is relatively compatible with the current edition of the game. I really appreciate Chaosium returning to their older editions and treating them with such respect. If you'd like to get hold of this product, I'll leave links in the description, and thank you for watching.